the June monthly meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council, and can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose song lines traversed these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal, the Jarrawa, and I deliberately include the Bigambal people who in fact do have a strong association with the western part of Toowoomba Regional Council area. Can I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is 66 days since the last notification of any coronavirus infections in this community, and I just think it's an appropriate time for me to pay my personal tribute to the medical profession in this community, broadly speaking, the whole health sector and what it brings to this community in terms of economic development and gross regional product, whatever way you like to put it, but particularly in terms of employment. But the devotion of many of those people to their duties is exemplary. Also, we can't forget the work that's been done by the men and women in blue who have made a tremendous effort to make sure that there's no spread of the coronavirus. So to all those people, I think on behalf of the community, I pay an endearing measure of gratitude to the work that they've done. Move then to item 2, which is attendance, including apologies, leave of absence, granting of leave, etc. Is anyone wishing to bring any matters up in terms of granting of leave of absence or any matters to that nature?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Summerfield.
I believe I will require a leave of absence for next month's ordinary meeting due to a medical procedure.
Okay. Would someone like to move that Councillor Summerfield be granted that leave of absence? Councillor Melissa Taylor, Councillor Tim McMahon. Those in favour? That motion is carried. Anybody else wishing to bring anything up? We move then to item 3, which is a confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 19th of May 2020. Would somebody like to move that there are true and proper record? Councillor McDonald has moved. A seconder, please. Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. Any comments? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Motion is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? No business arising. We'll move to item 5, which is the presentation of petitions. At the time of preparing this documentation, no petitions were on the agenda, but anyone who has a petition could bring that forward right now. Thank you. Move then to item 6, which is business from which the Mayor wishes to have considered this meeting. There's only just one matter I will bring up, and it was the result of a conversation I had last week with the Mayor of Cairns, Bob Manning, and Councillor Carol Taylor has communicated with us overnight in respect to this matter. It relates to a bed tax or a tax of tourism tax of some kind, and it relates to the wish on the part of the Cairns City Council to in fact have legislated in state legislature the opportunity for local governments to in fact impose a bed tax of their own wish, of their own volition. And that was the very nature of the conversation I had with Mayor Manning, and I can assure you that I've been doing a fair bit of work trying to contact the LGAQ to give us an appropriate briefing on that. It is not supported fully by the LGAQ. They have not endorsed it totally. It would no doubt be good for the tourism towns. Bob Manning was able to tell me very clearly what it would mean to this area. It would certainly fund our tourism, but of course I think Cairns has a much greater dependence on tourism in their economy, and consequently it's significant amount of money going out of the council coffers to support that each year, and they would very much like to see legislation brought through allowing local governments, not allowing the state government to do it because invariably they'll take their percentage, allowing local governments to do it. So that's the only matter I wish to bring up with there. Any comments around the room in respect to that? Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for clarifying that, because the report I read was inaccurate. So, and I think it'd be interesting to actually have that presentation, because I ambivalent about it. I mean, it may be that if we saw the pros and cons, we don't know how any of us would feel. So it'd be great to have a presentation on that, and I agree with you about the tourist towns, particularly the coastal ones.
Look, I'll certainly be talking to the to LGAQ, and I believe Sarah Buckler is the one to talk to in respect to it. I'll be doing that. The figures that were presented to me by Bob Manning indicated very significant funding would flow the way of our area, our regional tourism body here, through the, there's 4 councils involved in that, Councillor McDonald? 5. That's right, there's 5. And so that would all have to be worked out and split, but Councillor Manning was very, very keen to see that the state government did not get their fingers right into it, because they would no doubt take a percentage of that on its transition to local government. So it'll be an interesting, and I think it's a presentation that we ought to get. Is anybody interested in having that presentation? Can you? Yeah, I think this. Okay. Thanks very much. Where we got to? We move then to the reception of consideration of committee reports, and we move to item 8.1, which is the reception of Planning and Development Committee report.
Remove item 8, please.
Okay, so motion 1 will not deal with item 8. You're included too. Yes, Councillor Summerfield.
8.3 is, please.
8.3.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Any other matters to be taken out? Would someone then like to move the receipt of that report with the exception of items 8.3 and 8.8? Someone move accordingly, please. Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan has moved.
There's no 8.8. Is there?
Yeah. 08.
08.
It's item number 8. Councillor Summerfield in the...
Oh, I see what you mean. Yep.
It's item number 8 within the 8 within the Planning and Development Committee.
All right,
Thank you for your correction, but I was right this time and you were wrong.
Absolutely.
Made me feel good.
Thank you.
Councillor Carl?
Second.
You're happy to second it? Moved by Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Carl, that the Planning and Development Committee report, with the exceptions of item 3 and item 8, be approved. Those in favour? Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to item 3.
Mr Mayor, that was what I was saying. I don't need 8.3, number 3 taken out. I was confused with the following one.
You don't want number 3 taken out?
No, that's what I was trying to say, and that's what I was apologising for.
Well, I think in view of where we've got to now, we better just deal with item 3.
Yep,
that's the second motion.
Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Summerfield. That's an admission of guilt, amongst other things. Would someone like to move then that item 3 be received, please? Councillor Summerfield, yes, that's redemption. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan has seconded that. Those in favour? Carried. We move then to item 8 of item 8.1, Planning and Development Report, and some declarations.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is item 8, and it's a declaration for one of the items in item 8, which is pursuant to section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009. I'd like to inform the meeting that I have a personal interest in this matter, which I recognise may be a real or perceived conflict of interest, the particulars of which are as follows. The nature of the interest is I am a resident in the same street as the subject property referred to in item 1 of the schedule of matters in progress in the Planning and Environmental Court and or in the Magistrates Court enforcement actions. I'll be dealing with this declared conflict of interest by leaving the meeting while this matter is discussed and voted on. It's only that item 1 of the schedule of matters.
Thank you. Councillor O'Shea.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to make a declaration of a conflict of interest pursuant to section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009. I wish to inform the meeting that I have a personal interest in this matter which I recognise may be a real or perceived conflict of interest, the particulars of which are as follows. The nature of the interest is myself and my spouse engaged a builder to work on a property owned by us. The builder has then engaged the company referred to in item 1 of the schedule of matters in progress in the Planning and Environment Court and or in the Magistrates Court enforcement actions. I'll be dealing with this declared conflict of interest by leaving the meeting while this matter is discussed and voted on.
Just a moment, Councillor McDonald, you to go out for item 1?
They're both going out for item 1.
Both going out for item 1? Good. Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Summerfield, Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? Motion is carried. We move then to item...
They can come back.
Come back, please. We should just have a little glass soundproof cage, shouldn't we?
Phone of silence that drops down. Maxwell Smart.
Move then to item...
Motion 2 deals with the rest of the items.
Move then to motion 2, which deals with all items except the item that's just been dealt with. And do I have a mover for that? That's the receipt of the report. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan, Councillor Carl. Those in favour? That motion is carried. Right, we move then to item 8.3, 8.2, Water and Waste Committee. My apologies. Would someone like to move the report? Councillor Summerfield, Councillor Von Hoff, those in favour? Motion is carried. Move then to item 8.3. There is a matter there that I will declare a personal interest in, to be dealt with we deal with it now. Pursuant with section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, I'd like to inform the meeting that I have a personal interest in this matter, which I recognise may be real or perceived conflict of interest, in particular of which are as follows. The nature of my interest: my niece is married to a director of one of the tenderers mentioned in this report. I'll be dealing with this declared conflict of interest by leaving the room while this matter is being discussed and voted on. I ask Councillor McDonald to...
It's only one item.
Separate and then do the full.
There is only one item on that.
Thank you, councillors. I too have a declaration of interest, as explained last week at the committee meeting. Pursuant to section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, I'd like to inform the meeting that I have a personal interest in this matter, which I recognise may be a real or perceived conflict of interest, the particulars of which are as follows. The nature of interest is, I'm a part owner of property situated at 435 Ruthven Street, Toowoomba, and 2 Club Lane, Toowoomba. I request that it be minuted that I declared a conflict of interest in relation to item number 1, permit-style parking options, at the Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 10th of September 2019, and that councillors determined that I did not have either a real conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest. As the relevant circumstances have not changed since the councillor's declaration that I do not have either a real conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest, I am free to participate in the meeting whilst this matter is discussed, including voting on the matter. Councillors, it is item 4, and this is the only item, in fact, in the infrastructure services. So therefore, the motion before us is that the report of the Infrastructure Committee dated 9th of June 2020 be received and the recommendations therein be adopted. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor...
Mr Chair,
Yep.
I would like to debate this further, and as it's in confidential, we'll need to do that. And whether that's held over to the end of the meeting or debated now is your call as chair or CEO.
Maybe better to go to the end, I think. Don't you? Councillor, just given where we sit at the moment, I think we will take it to the last item of the agenda, if that's okay. It's closed session. So that being the case, you've done that, Wendy?
Motion,
Yeah, so Councillor Carol Taylor, are you happy then to move that this matter be considered as last item on the agenda today? So it gets transferred to the last item being a confidential.
I am, Mr Chair, but I thought there was ample discussion around it at the time, so perhaps you should get somebody else to move it.
Okay,
I'll
that's
withdraw
fine. Moved by Councillor Summerfield. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. No further debate required at this stage. We are shifting it if it's voted through. Those in favour? Carried. So that's it for there. Thank you, councillors. We can get the mayor back in. Here he comes.
do it again.
Right. We move to the balance of the Infrastructure Committee report.
That's done. We just go to 8.4.
8.4. Yep. So we move to the Environment Committee report, please. Do I have a mover that be received? Councillor O'Shea and Councillor McMahon. No questions or comments? Put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Move then to Finance and Business Strategy report. I'll have a mover, please, that report be received. Councillors McDonald. A seconder, please. Councillor Shine. Any matters you wish to discuss? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried. Economic Development report, where there was one matter that we dealt with there about a temporary change in procedures as far as purchasing was concerned. Would someone like to move accordingly, please? Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and Councillor O'Shea. Any questions? Those in favour? It's carried. We move then to item 9, which is the monthly performance statement. Anne-Marie.
Mr. Mayor, I probably missed the boat here, but I was just seeking clarification as to whether or not I could ask for consideration of, before we leave 8, of 8.04. That last week in committee we had a discussion about whether certain organisations would be eligible for a higher rate of discount or exemption from certain charges. And I'm just unsure about where we left it, because there were a couple of votes taken or indications of attitude taken, and I'm just seeking clarification as to where that stands at the present time.
Okay. Right.
So this is the economic development.
Future planning.
Economic development matter?
Was it?
That's an economic development matter?
No, it wasn't discounting or waiver of council development application fees. Oh, for
Planning.
Planning?
Oh, that's way back. That was deferred for future consideration.
Yes.
Deferred for future consideration.
Okay. Rather than sort of being left up in the air, if it could be heard for an information session to come our way.
That's pretty much where we are.
That's the way it would be dealt with,
Yes.
of course. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anne-Marie?
Good morning, councillors. Section 204 of the Local Government Regulation requires the monthly performance statement to be presented to council. The main implications of our statement are the water rates, so previously due on the 12th of May and extended to the 23rd of June. We have to date received 31 million of that 37 million, with the due date not until next week, so Tuesday next week. Also, Council's pandemic response stage 1, that was the $125 rates concession that was applied to over 69,000 residential and rural properties on the 2nd of May. That amount has been reflected, that's 8.7 million reflected in the statement presented today. So overall, reduction in operating income as a result of the pandemic is approximately 11 million. This includes that 8.7 million for stage 1 pandemic response, and also various fees and charges across council. And those fees and charges include parking, facilities and events. If we look down at operational expenditure again is below budget, and that is as a result of vacancies in the organisation and management of non-discretionary spend, while ensuring that our local suppliers are being engaged with improved payment terms and improved procurement for local suppliers. We are working closely to minimise the operating deficit that we have forecasted for the 30th of June. And moving down to our capital income, again below budget due to a downturn in development over the past 4 months. There is an expectation that this is going to improve, particularly with the federal, state and local government investment initiatives that have been announced over the last couple of months. Our capital expenditure, we have to date identified $26 million to be carried over in programmes until the next financial year. So out of that 190, that's 47 million to be delivered in June. The carryovers that we've identified to date are Queen's Park upgrade, the Toowoomba Escarpment Parks, and there's about 5 million in property services, 4 million in construction and maintenance, and that's across about 13 different projects, and 11 million in water projects, and that includes 6.5 million in Perseverance pump upgrade. That's the statement.
Any questions for the GM? Councillor Summerfield?
I have, thank you, Mr Mayor. So, as I have expressed previously, I'm concerned about our CapEx delivery, and I think it's just been highlighted right there then that we're looking at $47 million worth of projects to be completed by the 30th of June. We're halfway through the month now. And what does that look like for us in relation to the budget we just adopted yesterday? I am quite concerned that our CapEx delivery has been not performing particularly well at all. It's been raised previously. It's not as though the staff were not on notice that we wanted this delivery to happen. So I'm really keen at next month's meeting that all the general managers give us a report on where they haven't delivered and the reasons why. What does this do? We're looking 47 million to be delivered by the 30th of June in this 1 month to actually deliver as has been adopted. And I'd just like to make sure that the general managers are aware that there will be a requisite for a report from each of them as to why they haven't delivered.
Any other comments around the room?
And what impact that does for the budget we've just adopted.
Okay. Any other comments around the room?
I would
Councillor
just like to
Summerfield.
point
Councillor.
out that we have had COVID impact for a few months, so that needs to be taken into account. And we've also had an event in February that has stretched some of, I'm not sure where most of our area is not so bad, but over council, we need to be aware of it, asking why, but also we need to be looking at perhaps what, if there are legitimate reasons why that spend hasn't happened, we need to know about that as well.
Okay. Councillor McDonald.
Very quick comment, if I could, and I agree with the sentiments, and this council's very, very keen on making sure that the 2020-2021 budget has very strong oversight, and the discussions over the last 8 months or so have certainly indicated that to the organisation. I have to say that has, I wouldn't say raised the awareness, because the awareness was already there, but they've certainly noticed that there is an extra oversight on the organisation from councillors. What I would like to just point out is that we didn't have the opportunity to have a budget review too in this financial year, where much of this may well have been adjusted at that time. We did forecast around about $155 million to be spent in the capital budget through the deliberations of the capital works program for 2021. So I'm very keen to see that figure get to that amount, and based on 10 or 12 million a month, it looks like we'll be very close to that figure. So that in mind, the capital works program for 2021 has taken much of that into consideration. That aside, there is certainly a level of scrutiny from councillors here on the organisation, and vice versa. I know that the officers certainly do appreciate the fact that we're taking a strong interest in it as well. That's the only comment I'd like to make.
Any other comments around the room? Councillor Shine?
Just, it might be informative if we could get in that review that Councillor Summerfield has suggested for next month, that we get a picture of what the situation was, say, at the end of January this year, before that rain event and before COVID struck as well. Thank you.
I'm finding the budget reviews very useful when it comes to my summation of where we are with money cash flow, and I guess the lack of budget reviews in recent times mightn't have helped, but in saying that, a budget over a 12-month period with all the things that are thrown in the road of it from time to time, there are some reasons why these things happen, but I agree with your sentiment, Councillor Summerfield. We need to keep informed, but be kept informed of that kind of thing. Okay, Brian, will we be able to arrange some sort of a briefing on that? Yep. Okay. Any more questions for Anne-Marie? Thanks very much, Anne-Marie, and thanks for the work you've done with the budget, etc., etc., etc. Right, we now move to the Planning and Development Report. General Manager.
Just need a motion on the last one, Paul.
Oh, sorry. In the meantime, the receipt of the month. No, you can keep walking. It won't take long. Would someone like to move the receipt of that monthly report, please? Councillor Summerfield, Councillor Carol Taylor. Those in favour? Carried. Right.
Good morning, councillors. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Basically, Council has received the draft City Deals preliminary proposition paper written or prepared by Deloitte's Access Economics. This particular paper has been prepared at the request of TRC and TISB, working together, and the idea is to look for areas that we might benefit from the most in terms of the City Deals program that the federal government has been talking about for quite a few years now. The 4 opportunities that were investigated by Access Economics were transport and logistics, physical connectivity, in other words, I think that's code for the fast train to Brisbane, digital connectivity and export hub. Council is also working on a wide range of regional economic development, or working with a range of economic development partners on the pandemic economic recovery plan. We're particularly working very closely with the state government, Christian Rose and her team, in preparing the way forward in terms of economic activities that will assist particularly small business get back onto its feet. Council has received a draft shop top living design guideline for preliminary internal officer review. This is looking at all those spaces that are above the shops within the CBD. Aspect Architects, who are a local firm, have been commissioned to prepare a preliminary report, and we now have that. The officers are having a closer look at it in terms of some of the issues that are raised there, and we're looking for some additional input in terms of some of the solutions. It's quite a complex area once you start looking into it. We'll be hoping to brief council on that particular report towards the end of July. Just over the page, looking at the building certification area, they did 46 approvals in May and undertook 50 individual development inspections. We're attempting to keep that area busy, and they are busy with undertaking their community obligation, which involves internal advice and assistance, advice to people who are having problems with, dare I say it, other certification companies around the place, not necessarily local ones, I hasten to add. In terms of our Heritage Committee, the good folk that were on that committee, and hopefully a number of them will remain on that committee, have been undertaking an amount of work as a subcommittee on a publication, their latest publication, and they have over the years put out a number of publications, but the latest one relates to heritage sites around the region as a whole, and it's a driver's guide to how to get to those areas. I think Councillor Meganos would like to speak to that item. Yep.
Thank you. Mr Summers, I thought I was going to wait until you'd finished.
That is the last item.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. I did want to take this opportunity to talk about the Heritage Advisory Committee and the work that they've been doing, because they're a bunch of volunteers, as you know, on all of our committees, but to have this fantastic document, which is, it goes throughout our region, and it's not just heritage buildings, just to give you a bit of an idea, I think there's about 55 things that you can go and see, but they range from things like Rodway House, the Waterbird Habitat, Duggan Park, the Multugra Park, Nielsen Park. So you can get this guide at any of our service centres or in the library, but it's also available online. So, Mr Summers, I think, you know, the volunteers who have constructed this and written a brief history and given you a location guide for all of these things, it's just an incredible document and such a tribute to the work of the Heritage Advisory Committee. I'm very proud to present it here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And the rest of the report relating to development services and development engineering and plumbing services really are statistics. Happy to take any questions, councillors.
Councillor Shine.
No, thank you. Just make a comment, the obvious one, I suppose, that City Deal's preliminary propositions paper is, the shop top living design guideline prepared by Aspect Architects is of particular interest to, I'm sure, all of us, providing a solution to what do you do with the CBD and its future in terms of economic activity, etc. And look forward to that report coming at the end of July that you referred to.
Yes, Aspect have finished basically doing their part of it. The officers are having a look at it, particularly from the building certification and fire aspects to that. it is a tricky area, and there are issues to overcome, and the report from Aspect's quite good, and we'll be continuing to work with them to put finishing touches to that report before we bring it to council for a briefing. We're hoping, from a timing viewpoint, it would be towards either the end of July or into August by the time we'd be ready to have something that we could show council that would be getting close to being some sort of policy document that we could go out to the public with.
Two areas that have been mentioned to me of difficulty are the fire provisions and the necessity to have lifts installed and items like that. So I'm just wondering, in your evaluation of Aspect's report and your further investigations, whether you could make inquiries of other regional centres who may have also done some work in this regard, who may have come up with some helpful solutions, perhaps, as well.
Yes, I'm not sure to the extent that we've done that to this point in time, but certainly we normally do that to look at what the latest thinking is in terms of those issues. The building regs pretty much the same across Australia, so the building regulations, the fire regulations, they're pretty much the same in Queensland as they are in Victoria and South Australia. And they do throw up the same particular issues, particularly when you've got those older buildings, timber buildings. They don't have the fire separation between the floors, which can be an issue. But even more importantly is that fire escape issue. Not so much lifts. Lifts can be an issue if they're 3 levels, but certainly fire escape. There needs to be more than one point of escape usually. Can be overcome in some ways, but yeah, it's a matter of working through those issues and trying to find a solution.
So thank you. Just one further point. In the next section under Heritage Service, you refer to a contract landscape architect working remotely from Brisbane. Is that a architect employed by the council, or we don't have one of those types of architects?
Is contract
landscape
landscape architect at the moment. Yep.
Last paragraph on page.
So I think I missed the question. What was that?
Do we have on council or with council a contract landscape architect?
Yes.
And that is the person that you...
And we have we do have a the council landscape architect has been ill. He's been absent due to illness, and we've had a contract landscape architect. He does come and visit, obviously. As a landscape architect, you need to be siting sites and looking at plants and things, but he is based in Brisbane. We were unable to secure the services of a local landscape architect with the experience and qualifications required.
I see. But normally you would employ one, but who...
Oh, we have one who is ill, absent.
I understand. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question there. Yep.
Councillor Megan.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. I just sort of wanted to make a comment about the shop top living, Councillor Shine, where that's all part of the City Centre Master Plan in terms of what's going to be part of the next 10 years. So it's definitely, we've got to focus on looking at residential in the city. So, I think we're all of the same mind that things like the bars and the restaurants and the music scene will all come from people living in the city. So we're trying to work at it, and dare I say, parking too, as well as the fire regs and the people with disability access. So, that is all part of that focus at the moment on and on the revitalisation of the CBD.
Okay, any other questions for the GM? Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just, I know years ago I went to a hairdresser upstairs in one of the buildings in the CBD, and she said she was limited to what she could actually put in that hairdressing salon because of the construction of the building, and yet down the road we have another building where I went to a gym. So, and obviously they have heavy equipment in there. So I think also as part of that would be individual buildings would have to be considered based on how they were originally constructed and their weight-bearing capacity.
Yes, it's a complex area, as I said. And it depends on the classification under the building regulations as to what you can use it for. Councillors will recall that we withdrew basically the need for planning approval for any change of use within an existing building, but that's a planning regulation, not a building regulation. People still need to get a certifier to certify the building for the class of use that's going into that building, and especially if they're wanting to use upstairs, that becomes amazingly tricky. But we'll overcome that, I'm sure.
Any other questions for the GM? Councillor McDonald?
Very quick one, thank you. Mr Mayor, through you to Mr Summers. Stuart, in regard to the revised practices necessary for work from home structure and required change of habits, we talk about the change of requirement only one officer to carry out inspections for the team for building compliance. Is that something that, and it says here that it's starting to work, which is great news. This is on the page 2, fifth paragraph up, or third paragraph up from Development Services. I was just wondering whether you thought, or is it too early to assess this, whether that would become normal practice to only have one officer carry out inspections for the team?
It depends on the workload, to be honest. I suspect the workload is down at the moment in terms of the number of those inspections. We're not following through because of COVID-19. We're not following through, we're not inspecting a number of premises due to that. We're easing off a bit, but once we come back to full swing of things, I think there will be need for more than one officer to be out there inspecting. The other issue is that we are, I think, an officer down in regard to that area, and but we seem to be managing with that arrangement in place at the moment, but we will be watching that carefully, particularly in terms of building.
I may have got confused myself here, but it read to me that you would normally have more than one officer at an inspection.
Yeah.
Is here for social distancing?
No. Normally, you would have an inspector going out on his own. We don't necessarily double up, unless there's a risk, unless there's some issue with prior history with the owner.
You were saying
But normally it would be one person going out. It would be a rather expensive exercise if every inspection required 2 inspectors.
That was the exact way of my thinking.
Yep. We're online.
Good. Any other questions for the GM? If I can just comment in regard to the city deals, and there's a fair bit of talk about the city deals. ComSec have thrown a city deal together that's probably about $56 billion in terms of infrastructure and a whole range of things. And I think it's terribly important that we remain engaged in that, particularly in respect to the fast rail and any possible benefits coming our way. It's obviously, if there is to be a fast rail built in southeast Queensland, and I applaud the leadership of Graham Quirk in getting everyone together with a common cause, but I'd suggest that Sunshine Coast to Brisbane, Gold Coast to Brisbane will obviously get serious priority, and it's entirely up to us to keep our connection on the agenda. Now, to that extent, I'm meeting with Mayor Harding and Mayor Milligan in the next few days, in fact, to talk about keeping that on the agenda, and also talking to the likes of the ARTC people in respect to making some allowance for passenger rail, not only in the rail lines between here and Ipswich, but also potentially in the tunnel. So all these sort of things are on the agenda, and be assured, I think if we were to do nothing for the next 12 or 18 months in terms of advocating for it, it may not happen. I think it's important that we keep our eye on that ball. Any other matters that anyone wishes to discuss in respect to the planning report? If not, would someone then like to move the Planning and Development Group report be received, please? Councillor Carl and Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr GM.
Thank you, councillors.
Water and Waste, Damien.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Councillors, you can see at that top table there, as we've turned off the Wivenhoe, we didn't pump anything through that month. You can see that the dams are going down. We started at 33.7 and we're down to 32.7. Even when we didn't pull any water out of Perseverance, you see there's some evaporation and seepage out of those dams. So a body of water that you don't pull water out of into Toowoomba Bulk still goes down a little bit. So we're doing the preparations and the asset maintenance on Wivenhoe at the moment to get that back up and running in the first week of July. Crestbrook Dam is currently the principal source of water for the region, and we continue to run those pumps in that configuration as we're working on the Perseverance pump station. Ergon is on site at the moment working on the switchgear. Councillors, you can see in Water Project Services there, that's one of our smart standpipes. That one's at Pittsworth. Arrived construction commenced in June. In the Perseverance pump station, just mentioned Ergon is progressing well with the substation reconstruction work, so we're taking that from 3.3 kVA to 11 kVA. So Toowoomba is one of the last areas in Queensland to have 3.3 kVA connections into some of our critical electrical infrastructure. And it is a desire to de-risk that business by removing that gear and going to a conventional 11 kVA, which is where Ergon will have many more spare parts for you to get generators. The Perseverance main replacement, so between Kabala and Highfields works, that's progressing well. It is quite spectacular to go out there and see. It's almost not quite ballet, but the way the gentlemen, our teams, our Mike Brady's ISG teams are out there, they work in and around this heavy equipment, and it is almost like an orchestra, Mr Mayor. It's very impressive.
General Manager Brady doesn't look like a ballet dancer to me, Mr Brady, but I'll accept that as a...
Perhaps in his younger days, Mr Mayor. Councillors, under water supply system, unfortunately there was a leak in the Kubi main. Kubi is exceptionally important to Toowoomba's water security at the moment with Perseverance offline. Perseverance can be brought back online with a certain number of hours notice, but as we're running the system out of Crestbrook, Kubi has proved to be very vital in maintaining water security into the Toowoomba system. Smart meters, very exciting project. We're going out for proof of concept, which will be getting those smart meters to actually work throughout the system and make sure that the data that they generate, not only is there an app for that and the customer can see it on their mobile device, but also that it can work with all of our back office systems and generate the bills. That will take a period of time before rolling out those smart meters. It's no good rolling out a smart meter if it doesn't actually sit well with the systems and configurations in the back office. Another exciting one, councillors, and hope to say more shortly, is the invitation to tender was released on the 5th of May for the new energy generation, and workshops have been held with the 3 invited parties. Commercial in confidence at the moment, but we will, as soon as we can, be talking to the community about that. Very exciting. Waste services. Customer numbers seem to have returned back to normal after some of the COVID response where people found themselves at homes. We had very high numbers and queuing out at Amara Road. Pleased to say everyone's got on top of their gardening and clean out the shed, Mr Mayor, and those numbers have returned back to a more manageable area. The client waste facility construction is progressing very well. There's a picture there of the site at the moment, councillors. And another exciting one is the landfill gas is progressing with construction work to commence early June and flaring scheduled to commence in late June. So that will allow those fugitive gases which are currently permeating out through the landfill to be harvested and used to power some of Watella's energy requirements. Councillors, there was a little bit of rain on the weekend. Whilst it probably felt like about 40 mils here in Toowoomba, it was about 40 in Kubi Dam, about 28 in Perseverance, and about 22 in Cresbrook. In nice round even numbers, that's about the water that we got in is about 3 days, 3.5 days water supply for Toowoomba. So that's the context of that sort of rain event from the weekend, councillors. Mr Mayor.
Any questions for the GM? Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Platts. Probably not so much on your report, but I get a lot of requests for council to provide a curbside service, not a curbside service. I know that's not the right terminology for people, for us to pick up. What's it called? The
A bulk
yeah, like for residents to be able
curbside
to
collection.
pick stuff out. Yeah. So can you talk to me about that?
Councillors, I'm very happy to run an information session on that where we can tease it all out. My immediate reaction to the call, there's been calls over several years for us to consider that. I don't believe it's particularly safe. We find people putting material out on the curbside which produces A, a trip hazard, B, unmanaged material going out there, asbestos, all sorts of material. It's very expensive to actually pick that up. It is more efficient, I believe, and safer for the community if the curbside collection is not done and it is taken care of using commercial waste collectors.
Can I have a follow-up, Mr Mayor? So when you say that, do you mean that council will be employing, or what's the alternative to that?
There are commercial providers, councillor, that provide that service for a fee to residents.
Okay.
Councillor Shine.
Just on that point, why would that be cheaper? Why would that be a cheaper method?
For council or for the customer?
Well, at the end of the day, council will have to pay.
Councillors, it becomes a very unmanageable, you're not controlling what it is that you're collecting. You'll be collecting everything from mattresses as you're going along. You need flatbed trucks or you need tipper trucks. I'm happy to unpack it all in an information session where we can take the question as a question on notice, perhaps, Mr Mayor, to an information session where something can be more fully discussed in an informed way.
No, thank you. As I understand it, the system does operate in Brisbane, so...
It operates in Brisbane, and I've seen it operating in Brisbane. I'm personally not a fan of it. I don't think it's particularly safe. There's asbestos, there's different measures of different containers of goods which are put out there. You are now co-bundling and mixing material within either a flatbed truck or a tipper truck. It's not ideal, but I'm happy to unpack that in an information session in a more informed way.
Would you, if I may, would you know how many curbside collection sites there are on an average week, you know, in terms of normal rubbish?
Sorry, Councillor, I can't really hear your question. Is it how many are in Queensland? How many different councils do or don't?
How many garbage collections do we pick up every week in Toowoomba? How many residences, I suppose?
Councillor, it's in the order of 60,000 because we have different people having, there's a yellow bin, a red bin and a green bin. So there are different numbers each week on the cycle of that, but I'm happy to bring that information to Chamber.
Just can I ask a different topic, just in relation to that, I think the first table, it sets out the drinking water supply scheme, the drinking water consumption, and it indicates the system losses. Being new to looking at these figures, it just occurs to me as a newcomer that the losses are, you know, significant. In general terms, what causes those losses and what can be done about it, or what is being done about it?
So there's two sets of losses that we're talking about. One is in the body of the dam, of a body of water which has evaporation and seepage. These dams, although you try to build them so that they have, you pick a site with a high degree of clay and that sort of material, you can't guarantee it, so it will go into the soil. You do have evaporation, which is dependent upon wind and upon temperature. So different dams have different performances according to the prevailing winds So that's in the body of the dam. There are some things you can do to reduce not only a little bit of seepage, but also, you know, a farmer in a small dam will throw bentonite into it. That will help seal it. But in a big dam like this, it's not particularly practical. There are things that you can put on the surface of the water. There is a product like a sunscreen. I've seen that. It's not particularly successful because the prevailing wind pushes it up into a corner. There are things like, you know, at the children's play groups where they've got, they all dive into those balls, those little rubber plastic balls. You can put balls across dams. I've seen that. Particularly ugly, particularly if you're a water skier or you want to use the aesthetic appeal of a dam. They're not very practical when you have a flood. They all end up in Moreton Bay, and then you have to try and recover these things. So there are some things you can do. There are some technologies out there. Some of them are quite ugly. In terms of the system losses, once it goes from the dam through the trunk mains, there is loss of water in the treatment process. So there is a brine stream, not a brine stream, but a waste stream that comes out of backwashing and filter washing, things like that at Mount Kynoch. Then once it gets into Leesa Reservoir at Mount Kynoch, you know, the system is not absolutely perfect. It has joints in it, and joints of various ages, configurations of pipe of various ages. So there are there is a measure of efficiency of system losses. It's called an Ili factor. An Ili of 1 is about as good as you're going to get. You should stop chasing it. An Ili above 1 is that there is some potential efficiencies. What we have seen is we continue to see breakages. This system is, some parts of it, Mr Mayor, are quite old. In some parts we're finding problems with trunk mains. For example, Perseverance trunk main, we're replacing that. We've found some issues with Kubi trunk main. And most recently, we've got our engineers out there having a particularly good look at 60 metres of it that we're a bit worried about. So when you lose a trunk main, you lose a fair bit of water in that as well. Help, Councillor Shaw?
Hopefully I'll remember some of it. I suppose what I was getting at, though, if you look at page 2, I think it is, of your report, and that top table, it indicates the water supplied and the system losses, etc., to each of those townships or suburbs, or townships really. And I take it that's, you know, something that's occurred between, say, Mount Kynoch and the outlet in those villages or towns. So what would cause that? Some defect in pipes or?
There's a number of things. Some of it is in the metering as well, Councillor. When I came to council, I asked my planners for what's called a mass balance, and they couldn't do it because we've got a mesh network, many interconnections and pressure zones. The valving wasn't right, and the meters weren't there to measure water going from one part of a suburb. We're naming these as suburbs, but the suburbs don't exist as an individual configuration of pipes. They're in a mesh. And that you do that to maintain redundancy. So, for example, I have a blowout on one reticulation main. We have a fire somewhere. We revalve and bring water so that the least amount of customers are ever out of water, and the least amount of fire hydrants, for example, are out of water. So there are advantages of having a mesh network. That we've went and bought the what I call the system meters. So these are meters which aren't billed anywhere, but so that we can get metering into the pressure zones, and I can get a mass balance by pressure zone. Now, we're still not quite there. The last of those smart meters, or last of those network smart meters went in, don't quote me on this, I think it was May or April, and we're going to start looking at data. So engineers want to have a trend line of data to understand it. They can't just come up with a number from the first month of metering. Excuse me.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Just a comment, a couple of comments, if I may, on the back end of those questions. I look forward, firstly, to a briefing around curbside collection. I understand from past experience in the portfolio that there is a significant risk, and I don't think the GM has adequately covered it, and I don't blame him for not covering that in this forum, because my prior travels, and internationally. Point of source separation, i.e. the wheelie bins we have, is by far the most economical and risk-free around separation of materials in waste streams. Where we think we might save dollars on curbside collection ends up as a very, very costly exercise to the organisation and to the ratepayer ultimately. But that's a comment, so I do look forward to unpacking that. And the other comment around water loss and in the network from very and many sources or points in the network is a good bit of information for us to have around asset management and planned maintenance of the network, because it helps the officers and this boardroom make very clear and informed decisions about where we invest into critical infrastructure and essential infrastructure in the future around network loss and asset management. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, just two more questions. Councillor Megan and then Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I suppose I just wanted to, I didn't want to labour the point, but I really would like to see that information session. And if it isn't going to be that collection, what are the alternatives in terms of having a private person coming around and the cost to council for that? So we're committed to come back with an information session, if that's okay. Thanks, Mr Platts.
Take that as a comment, Mr Mayor. Yep.
Okay, you'll organise that. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Through you to Damien, I'm just after a little bit more information on some of these, if you might please, Damien. On page 2 of 8 of your report, at the very bottom, there's an exceedance and discharge licence limit that you've noticed with an event at Pittsworth. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Councillors, we have licence conditions on the biological content that we have in what we release in phages and in coli. There are a lot of quality aspects of the licence. It's not unusual to have exceedances. The Pittsworth is one. I'm happy to run an information session with the councillors to actually run through a great many of the sewage licences, because we've had another one in relation to Watala just recently, which principally was a rain event. So, councillors, I'll just digress a moment here, because we do smoke testing in the sewer network. So we pump smoke into the network to try and find where those puffs of smoke come out of drain pipes, of people's gutters, to try and identify stormwater connections into the sewage network. You don't want stormwater into the sewage network. It's not built for stormwater. That's why we have a stormwater diversion and a system. So when you get these inundations of inflows from storm events, the sewage system just can't handle that. So in the licence conditions, there are allowances. We build to a certain standard. Like, we can't, it would be too expensive to build to take all stormwater. That's not a good idea, because when you get these stormwater inundation events into a plant, you push out all your bugs, and your bugs are the bits that are breaking down, the healthy colony of bugs are the bits that are breaking down the faecal matter and the urine and the other matter which is put into the sewer system. So when we have a big inflow, it can take us time to recover in that plant, and you can see these exceedances come through, and that's what you see in the licences. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Thanks.
Von Hoff.
Thank you. So the second one I was going to ask you about was that one on the following page about Watala, but you're saying that's the result of a rain event. Is that correct? Next one then, at the bottom of page 3, when we're talking about the ergon work at the substation, and that their program slipped by 4 weeks due to issues encountered on site. I wondered if you could talk us through what those issues were, and do you foresee that that delay is going to be a problem? It was my understanding that we were trying to get that in place ahead of the end of the year and the summer. Do you think that that's going to impact our ideal deadline at all?
Councillors, there's a number of moving parts of Perseverance. It's a very small footprint. It is a private access road that we've got there, so essentially only one contractor can be there at any one point in time. There is absolutely a desire to get this back up and operational because we only have a certain window of time before we need the redundancy of having an additional dam back in service. In theory, we can release water out of Perseverance, bring it down, drop it to Crestbrook and then bring it up. But if we lost the Crestbrook main, or if we lost a Crestbrook pump station through an asset failure or an electrical failure or a power line failure, then we don't have a great deal of redundancy at the moment. So we always need Kubi plus one of those trunk mains to have, and dams to have redundancy into this system.
So will that 4 weeks be a problem come December, do you think?
Councillors,
Contingency built into our plan that we should be okay.
Sorry?
So I was saying, do you think that month, that delay of a month, is that going to be a problem come December, or have we built in enough contingency into our planning that we will be okay?
Councillors, I'm not so much worried about that 4 week delay. What I alluded to before was the 60 metres of Kubi pipeline. That's a bit that I'm quite concerned about at the moment. The engineers will program shuffle and we'll get Perseverance back up. Eventually, councillors, once the electrical componentry is done, we've only got one pump in the tower at Perseverance. It's configured for two. We are changing that entire configuration to 2 low lift pumps and a high lift pump. That is a complex exercise. So this won't all be done. We won't have those pumps in and done by this summer, no.
Okay, thank you.
But that's not what this 4 weeks delay would push, yeah.
You another question, Councillor Von Hoff?
Very last one, thank you, Mr Mayor. On the final page of the report, we talk about how well received the polystyrene recycling machine has been, and we're talking about significant feedback has been received welcoming the implementation of this recycling service. Now, I know that there's been quite a lot of talk about the yellow bins and putting the polystyrene in those yellow bins, and our position at the moment is that polystyrene that goes into our yellow bins won't be put through the machine. We have to have people deposit that polystyrene separately so that it can be put into the cage and put through the machine to be recycled. Is that the standing situation, or will that be revised?
Yeah, there's not if you put the polystyrene in the yellow bin, for example, as a mum and dad resident, that's not necessarily the best place for it. So the polystyrene really needs to be taken out to Amara Road and processed. This machine is the first trial one that we've got, whether or not we put more in the Tier 2 facilities perhaps, or in other locations. Ideally, that material should be brought out to Amara Road so it can be processed or to one of the transfer stations so that we can amalgamate the pieces and put them to that machine and process it.
So if we have residents who have a lot of polystyrene, then we should be encouraging them to put it in the trailer, put it in the back of the ute, and come out to O'Mara Road and deposit.
Or any of the transfer stations. We will amalgamate that and bring it through to O'Mara Road. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just clarifying that contents in the yellow bin are JJ's. They actually handle all the content in the yellow bin. That is part of their business of the contract that we have with JJ Richards. They then take it out to their facility on whatever the name of that street is, way up in the north, and they do separations up there and take it to Brisbane, and it's all recycled down there.
Thank you. Some years ago, I guess when we were looking at for the money to build the pipeline, there's a community called Gumbungie around here, of course, who had a funded sewage system. A sewage system that was funded but hadn't been built. Is it on the agenda or not on the agenda, or are we giving any consideration at all to Gumbungie? It's, I was out there the other day, and it's a reasonable sized town to be without the service of a sewage system.
Mr Mayor, yes, we're doing the Water Futures strategy, looking principally at water security at the moment. A natural order of things is to get the water side of the business, the strategies right. Yes, we're looking at the sewage strategy after that. There was a planning report prepared in relation to the sewering of a number of our regional areas. That I didn't bring that up to the committee. It's sitting in my office waiting to come up.
Yep. I know I can think of a lot of sewage systems in those smaller towns that will look at Clifton and the issues that have been created there. I guess Crow's Nest has its own issues as well with their CED system, and just wondering where we were in the journey of tidying all that up.
So the Crow's Nest, CED schemes, Crow's Nest and Cambodia are the two that we have. So in very simple terms, that's connecting up some pipe to mum and dad's septic tank and taking the overflow out of the septic tank, in simple terms. Crow's Nest is in the catchment for Crestbrook Dam. I really don't like that sewage system there. Yes, we've got some money in the next year's capital program to look at how we do Crow's Nest.
Yep.
In particular. And I know Goombungie was in one of these regional towns. I can't remember the others off the top of my head, Mr Mayor.
Yep. Okay, any other comments? Not, would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor Von Hoff. Seconder, please. Councillor Summerfield. Those in favour? That's carried. We move then to infrastructure services. Mike Brady. How are you, Mike? Sorry about that previous comment, but I don't see you as a ballet dancer.
No, I haven't got my tutu today. I'm more of a Saturday Night Fever fan. I'll give you some moves later.
Image. I think you better get on with your report.
The good old days. Yeah, the good old days. Councillors, there might be a bit of innovation there, wouldn't it? No. We'll move forward. The transport and drainage planning element of our report there, I'd like to just step into straight away. The National Heavy Vehicle Regulators project that we've got involved with. That should be something quite interesting to see and helpful. There's about $8 million invested in that project around Australia through the HVR, through the federal government, and it's over 3 phases between now and September, the end of 2021. And it's looking at key freight routes across probably 3 or 4 councils in each state, and working through bridge assessment methodologies and other assessment methodologies to see, to probably bring back a more consistent picture into management of bridge assets and culvert assets across Australia. So we've got a lot of information there ourselves. We've been involved in this sort of journey the last few years through our Ag and Logistics working group. So this is sort of a project that's sort of got a very strong link to that. Other things that are happening, obviously, at the end of May there was the closure of James Street at East Creek and West Creek, and generally speaking I think the traffic's still going fairly smoothly, with Herry Street being the main in-town detour. Obviously there was a lot of encouragement for heavy vehicles by TMR to use the Toowoomba bypass, and I think that's working in general terms. There may be the occasional hiccup, but overall going okay. Towards the end of the month we also had Fatality Free Friday, 29th of May, and Councillor Taylors was able to get involved with the Queensland Police Service a little bit and make that a bit of a media event there. Towards the end of the month as well, we put in submissions under the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity Program and Bridges Renewal Program for a number of projects as noted there. I just want to make you aware, just at the bottom of that first page, there is a little typo that's snuck in, councillors. It's got Neald Road, and it's meant to be Mount Neil Road. with the, so just as amended on up the report there. From construction maintenance, the team's been very busy across the whole of the region. Lots of work happening, projects such as the Wairima-Kambuya Road, getting closer to completion, again weather permitting by mid-July. Those are sorts of projects that, without that month delay in February, would have been sort of completed this month. Other projects that we've been doing a lot of work with DTMR and the Bowmanville Norman Road project that was sealed on Saturday, just gone. The DRFA arrangements, were the 2018 event progressing well. Further, we've got a number of low-cost seals or rural road seals, we're starting to call them now. Wilson's Road and Rosenberger Road projects are well progressed. In the north, there's a couple of photos of different road rehabilitation projects, and also a number of footpath projects that have been happening over the last couple of months across the region. You can see the one there, the footpath that council supported in Hayden being constructed there, and obviously one in Crow's Nest and Oakey. So across the region, quite a number of different sorts of works happening. Centrally, the Highfields Toowoomba Cycleway, Bikeway project, the first stage of that, stage 1A, we completed with TMR, and the teams have just commenced on the second stage up near Toowoomba Christian College, and then Road Tech are doing works at Cawdor Road intersection at New England Highway, and also I think this morning, they've just started at the New England Highway at the second range crossing, so that'll be good to see that section done as well. Further through, Damien mentioned the work around the Perseverance Rural Water Main. The teams are going very well in that space out there, and the Tummerville Road Timber Bridge has been demolished, and the new girders and piles and girders are under manufacture in Brisbane as we speak, and that probably gives you a quick overview through you, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions for the GM? Any comments? Councillor Summerfield and Councillor Taylor then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that report, Mike. Just wondering, and I realise it's not your particular area, but I did wonder whether you're aware of the uptake of the second range crossing in relation to trucks. Is it, are we really getting the majority of the trucks out of the city, or are we still getting the sneaky little cowboys coming through? Or
oh, look, the vast majority by a long way. I think the early figures were close to upwards of nearly 80% of heavies that used to go through the city of Toowoomba started using the bypass. I think right now, with the work that's happening, they're using the bypass. We've got other links into the city, obviously, through Boundary Street and obviously even further west off the Warrego Highway, so to our western industrial areas. So, yes, no, it's proved very beneficial. I'm not quite sure of the latest figures, though. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's really lucky that has happened with the two culverts that are being replaced in the city, because I'm sure that we none of us would be able to be sitting here so calmly if all those heavies were coming down Herries Street. I just wanted to comment, Mr. Mayor, on the putting in the pipe for the Perseverance Rural Water Main, and what a great job that the crews out there are doing. It's really probably worth going and having a look if it can be arranged, because we've got one of our guys that gets in the pipe, and they've got all this equipment to make sure that it's sealed properly and all that. It's quite a very intricate, complex job, and I think through you to Mr. Brady, I think it's safety out there is of one of the greatest. It is on all our jobs, but one of the biggest concerns out there, and it's been managed that way. But they're doing quite well, aren't they, with the timing of it? And and it's so constrained as it gets in closer to Highfields because it's so close to the housing and people's residences that are there. So I think that, with the combination of water and waste and ISG, I think it's a really great project. I'd like to congratulate the teams, actually. They're really doing a great job.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Any other comments? Councillor Megan?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Two questions, Mr Brady. Just talking about the second range crossing. So a while ago we talked about the signalling, like particularly along West Street and all of that would be reviewed after the free period on the second range crossing had been assessed or whatever. So has that been done, do you know?
Yes, TMO have taken on board a lot of community requests in regards to that, and there has been a number of reviews. There's actually been probably at various intersections 2 or 3 times in the last year, and again even now with the closures at East and West Creek, those again the intersections have been finessed to try to optimise the traffic movements that are happening, particularly Prescott Street. Prescott Peachy in the highway there, also up around West Street. I won't say, one of the things that has come in that sometimes annoys people is the filtering movement that they used to allow on green, which would allow you to turn right without the green arrow. That has been phased out basically across the country. So that's because of the, particularly where it's multi-laned roads, where there's 2 lanes each way. So there's been, unfortunately, too many T-bone accidents over the years, and it's just been a safety measure to phase that out. So people do get a level of annoyance. What's trying to bring in to mitigate that is obviously more intelligent transport systems within the actual operations of the lights. So originally they only were very sort of fixed times when how they'd work, and over the years as they get upgraded, and then the systems are upgraded probably every 5 years, typically within an intersection. That allows for further technology to be brought in, and for more sensors to be brought in and sort of help the traffic move at different times of day and different times of the week a little bit more smoothly.
Interesting, thank you. I have another?
Yeah, you're right.
Just make a comment on that. The filters are back on the James Street, West Street lights, possibly while the culvert's being done, I'd say.
Yeah, there's still some there.
Sorry, Councillor Began, back to you.
Oh, thank you. I was just curious about the work down on James Street about finding the old bridge or whatever. So what ended up happening with that? Is that noted, and then what happens?
I'd have to, in this case, I'd have to contact TMR and see exactly what actions have been taken, but typically with a lot of those heritage, cultural heritage type from European settlement, in this case, those items are either sometimes collected and maybe be removed from site. In other circumstances, they are reburied into the project and left in situ. So it does depend on exactly where they sit within the project being constructed at the time. The advice I got was that it looked to be maybe some old corduroy, so timber corduroy from the old Cobb and Co type days across the creek. But exactly, I haven't seen any photos or anything, so I'd have to contact TMR to get more details. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just a very quick one, Mr Mayor. Through you to Mr Brady. Mike, on page, whatever it is, I'll tell you. Get to it. Page 3 of 7, actually right at the top. You talk about the 2020 DRFA rain event emergency works to get roads open, completed by mid-May, and then we talk about restoration submissions.
Yep.
Do we have a time frame for when they need to be in and when we may expect any announcement on what was successful and what might not be?
Yeah, so the process is the emergent works had a 3-month window, so that finished in mid-May. We have, from a whole of program point of view, a 2-year window from basically the 1st July to do the works, so the next 2 financial years. Obviously, we try to get to restoration works as soon as we possibly can. In regards to submissions, we are aiming to be in a position to have that agreed to and worked through with Queensland Reconstruction Authority before the end of the calendar year, possibly earlier, but there is a process to go through which can take a fair bit of time if past examples of what's occurred. So it'll take the next at least 3 to 6 months is what we're considering.
Councillor McMahon and then Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank you, Chair. General Manager Brady, I noticed in General Manager Anne-Marie's report, fleet was below budget, 4.2 million, and then in this, the last page of your report, we have a whole bunch of assets waiting to be disposed of at auction, and we haven't been able to do that to COVID. So I'm thinking is that would make the discrepancy higher. Is there any reason for the big change in budget that's a simple answer, or just the times we're in?
They're somewhat two separate elements that you're talking there. There's the procurement and the capital budget, and I've been assured by the manager Fleet and Logistics that'll be fully expended before we'll have all the deliveries by the 30th of June to meet the committed budget for this year. So on that side, in respect to the auctions, the actual auction houses put a close basically on the during COVID-19 and have just only reopened. So that's been a delay in being able to dispose of vehicles and other items of plant. So that's June, they'll see the resumption of the auction. So there'll be a lot of stuff going to auction across, because that was closed to everybody. So we'll manage exactly the timing of when we take our older items of plant through. So whether that all goes through this financial year or some of that is into the next financial year will be a little bit dependent on when we can get best value.
Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Through you to Mr Brady. Mike, I'm curious about the Highfields Toowoomba Bikeway project. I see work's progressing well there. And quick question, is the bikeway the same width the whole way through from Highfields to Toowoomba?
Not the approach that Team A have taken with the project is the concrete sections that they're doing. As you see at the moment out at Highfields, those are all 3 metres wide, and that'll be through to Toowoomba Christian College at this end, at the northern end. At the southern end, at this stage, the new sections going on to the bridge at Ewingland Highway will be 3 metres wide. They are looking at some, might call them interim sections that means the bike rider's got to go back on road. So between Christian College and Toowoomba, so not all of that whole Toowoomba to Highfields Toowoomba cycleway in its entirety will be concrete. Not at this stage. They'll have to get further funding in years to come to do more works. There is getting over the top of Mount Kynoch has always been one of their challenges from a cycleway perspective. So they are looking at an option that sees it go to the west of the Mount Kynoch reservoir and around through the proposed estate that's looking at being constructed through there. So there's some other options they're looking at.
What's supplementary, if I might? And what's the completion date, the proposed completion date of that one?
The sections under the current budget are to be completed by the end of this calendar year. So that's the the section near Toowoomba Christian College and the section near the whole.
Whole thing?
Can't give you an answer on that. That's with TMR. So exactly, it'll be dependent on their future funding.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the GM? If not, would someone like to move that receipt of that report? Councillor Taylor has moved that. Councillor Melissa Taylor has seconded that. Those in favour? Motion is carried. We move then. Thanks very much, Mike. Move then to Nicholas, Environment and Community Services.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Councillors, a very busy month for the Environment Community Services Group, again, as you'd imagine. I just wanted to take some time to highlight the innovations in our Library and Cultural Services branch for you, and there are a number of them listed, but notably the MyTR Library app, that's a recent introduction, and some new functionality in that app to allow for self-issuing of items of library members. That's thought to be a new initiative that we've not seen in any other libraries that we know of. So the team went as far as to claim that as a world first. I was a little bit uncomfortable with that, but to the best of our knowledge, we're not aware of any other libraries utilising such functionality. So that's a credit to the team and their work there, and sure to make the customer experience all that much better and us more efficient and productive at what we do. Staying with the theme of libraries, we've commenced, as you know, the staged reopening of our library service, commencing back on the 25th of May with our reserve and collect functionality, and that's proven to be taken up reasonably well by community, and we continue to monitor the changes to the easing of restrictions around COVID-19, and we have a staged plan in place to reopen those facilities to our community. Over the page in Parks and Recreation Services, we can see that we've been quite busy in the biosecurity area throughout the month, with a number of property inspections undertaken and also a number of biosecurity outbreaks, if I can put it that way, attended to by the team and the subject of ongoing monitoring. Staying with Parks and Recreation, a number of refurbishment works of facilities whilst the utilisation is down with restrictions around our sporting facilities has been completed, a number of projects completed. And finally, if I can just highlight the completion of construction of the principal depot at Charlton, and our teams have in fact begun to move in there. So stores were the first team in there, and safety, and GM Anne-Marie spent a bit of time out there helping the team settle in, and Parks and Rec and C&M have been moving in last week, and we're all looking forward to spending a bit of time there and helping the establishment of that facility. But it's a marvellous facility. We've organised for you to go on a tour there shortly, and I'm sure you'll marvel at it as much as I do. And with that, Mr Mayor, happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the GM? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. True to you, Nick, the Parthenium that's been identified near Cambodia, there has been an outbreak there in the past between Cambodia and Greenmount. Is it a large outbreak, or is it in the rural area?
I'm not aware of the details, Councillor Taylor, other than...
So I have to say to you, though, that friends have said that in areas where Parthenium gets a go, you either have it or you haven't. And in a while, if you haven't, you're going to have it. So we need to, that's one of the weeds that we really need to jump on really quickly. And, you know, I guess that you know, you think you don't see it when it's dry, but I suppose the rain has brought it on and we've noticed it, I guess. The other thing I'd like to make a comment on, if I might, is that VE Day, you know, I'm very disappointed that our press didn't pick that up here. I didn't see anything about it. I'm pleased we did this. I had a Skype call with a friend of mine over in the UK, and they all stood like we did for our Anzac Days out near their mailbox or near their entrances to their house. And somehow in Australia it just got forgotten. So, you know, we had quite a lot of people from our country involved in that, and it meant a lot to this country. So it's nothing we can do about it, and I'm really pleased that we commemorated it, probably, celebrate's the wrong word, but I'm really disappointed that there wasn't more effort on the television in particular to remind us all, because with COVID, you know, a bit difficult for everyone to remember those things. So thank you for that happening. Thanks. And if I could find out about the Parthenium, and I think
Yep.
I'd be very pleased to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, was there another question, Councillor Megan?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr GM, I was just, I also get asked about the depot and what is going to happen with the existing depot sites. And I guess that's a complicated question that you can't answer here. But can you give me a time frame when that will be then looked at in terms of what's going to happen?
Thanks for the question, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. What we'll do with the old depot sites is a matter for Council's consideration. So we've in the process of preparing a report with a couple of options for your consideration. We'll have that to you in the coming months for a decision. In terms of their current use, we'll have some occupation of those sites through till the end of the year as we continue to establish out. It'll diminish dramatically, in the coming weeks and months, but it'll take us a little while to get completely out of there. So we still do need to have access for that period of time, but I look forward to bringing that report to you for a decision around the future of those sites for sure.
Any further questions? Councillor O'Shea?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a comment and probably a question to go with as well. Nick, just of the points that's been highlighted there by the GM as well, I think it's also worth noting, received 216 applications for those micro grants. So a good news story and a bad news story in some ways, I guess. The good news is, and it shows how much that was taken up by our community. Obviously, there was only a certain number that we were able to give away, but I think it shows obviously that how much that was warranted and how much that was received by those different groups. I think it's, often you can have these different things, it's great to see that there was a take-up of it. Secondly, Nick, if you could just elaborate a bit on, obviously we've seen in recent times, of course, the reopening of a number of council facilities, so albeit under different circumstances, visitor information centres, pools, gyms, libraries, and it's just the message for the community is one that they're open, but I think there's also, I think a lot of us probably have received calls along this, is just to be patient with it as well, because there are slightly different conditions around the reopening of a lot of these facilities.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor O'Shea. It's a really good point that you make. They are opening, but they are operating differently than they used to. So especially in our swimming pools and our fitness centres, they're not open for you just to turn up at the door and go for a swim. For example, you need to make a booking. We can only have 20 people in the facility at a time, and so on and so forth. So if you're thinking about availing yourself of those facilities, please check out the details either on the website or by giving our customer service a call, and we can explain those changed operating arrangements. But yes, definitely we are getting back their facilities opening this week. Milne Bay Pool due to open next week. Visitor information centres opening today, like you mentioned. So we're getting there, but it is different. You need to check that out before you rock up and think you can have a swim.
Councillor Megan?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Nick, I know that you are incredibly across your brief and you might not have the answer to this, but the Healthy Living Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander booklet that was made up by the Youth Connect team, was that one of their projects by one of the... The reason I'm interested is because we have all these advisory committees and, these people give a lot of their time and energy and I suppose what I'm wanting to know is, was there a cross collaboration with the Torres Strait Islander Committee, Advisory Committee, and what was that booklet designed to do? I know that that's a... I don't know the word I'm looking for. I was going to say low level. It's not a low level question. It's just the detail of which you might not know.
And you're right, I don't know the detail. Given that it's Parks and Recreation reporting that through our Healthy Living and Sport and Active Recreation group and done on behalf of the Youth Committee, there's certainly collaboration between those branches. Understanding the way the Youth Advisory Committee operates, I'm sure that members of that committee would have had some input into that. But I'd like to take your question away if I can and just come back to you with some more detail about the level of collaboration with other advisory committees and across the organisation. Thanks, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Any other questions? Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, a couple of quick ones, if I could, please, Nick. Just in regard to, and I agree with Councillor O'Shea in regard to the 216 applications, we made a commitment to have those dispersed this current financial year. We're on track to do that.
Yes, we are, yep.
Will there be a list of those that receive dollars and the amounts at some point?
Yeah, I'll be able to provide councillors with a list of that. I think I've received a preliminary report that I haven't had a chance to have a close look at yet, but as soon as I do, I'll circulate that for your information.
Great, if we could do that. Second one was just around, and it may be a question on notice, just to councillors to get an understanding of the maintenance work for the art gallery, regional art gallery, and due to complications from building works. And I just wonder whether that's something we should be wary of as an organisation for a more drastic problem, or whether it is just maintenance and there was something else that cropped up along the way. As I say, it might be a question on notice.
I can provide a bit of a preliminary overview of that, but circulate more detail via email if you like. It started with an air conditioning issue, and when we pulled the air conditioning out, we found asbestos. We had to deal with that. We had to relocate collections. We found a water leak. We had to replace carpet. So it just was a bit of a... every time we turned around, there was another issue that we had to deal with. We're all on top of that now. Some items had to come from overseas, and they were delayed because of lack of availability of flights, and all sorts of things have complicated that one. But I can provide you with an email that gives you all the blow-by-blow what happened. And
I don't need a blow-by-blow. I was just thinking that it sounds like it's more general maintenance rather than a major problem.
Yes, that's correct. And it's probably the perfect time for us to discover it, I suppose, with the gallery being closed.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in response to that, it was good to drop into the library and cleaning 300-year-old mould off some projects in hazmat suits. But they, I believe, have their new state-of-the-art aircon up and down going, which is temperature, humidity controlled, so that's good. General Manager Nick, I just had a question regarding the wild dog baiting program. And 1,300 baits is fairly good uptake, I would imagine. Do you have any numbers on... I don't think there is possible to catch, but numbers caught as a result of those baits, and in regards to 38 scalps in the bounty program and the baiting program, are we doing anything to reduce wild dog numbers overall? Like, is 38 scalps half of the local wild dog population, or a tip of the iceberg? Do you have any numbers regarding that?
It's a great question, and one that's difficult to answer because wild dogs don't attend the census every 4 years, so it's difficult to know how many there are. But I think, and councillors, I've circulated separately for you some information. We have seen a general decline in the uptake of both our baiting program and the scalps that are being presented. And that's interesting in and of itself. You would imagine that if property holders were experiencing an increase in wild dogs, that uptake would increase, not decrease. So there's something for us to have a good look at there, and try and engage with property owners and understand why that's not being taken up, because there are reports of an increase in wild dog numbers, and our neighbouring councils are experiencing that also, and as has been reported through Biosecurity Queensland. There are a number of things that we surmise are probably contributing to that, including seasonal environmental conditions, cluster and exclusion fencing that's happening to the west of us, destocking of livestock in western areas, perhaps putting dogs on the move, and so on and so forth. So there's a number of things that might be contributing to that increase in wild dog numbers. It's interesting that, like I say, participation is not increasing, so we need to have a look at that and see what we can do to get it, raise the profile.
Just a follow-up, thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1,300 out of 41 landowners, or registered baiters, so sounds like a large number of baits to a smaller number of landowners. Do we have data on, are they all located in a similar area, or are they scattered, or
we will have that data available. There's quite stringent recording requirements for participating in the baiting program, so we'll know how many baits were issued to which properties and where they are, so we will have that information.
I took this matter up with you during the week, and as a result of my visit to my home territory on the weekend, where on Saturday morning we have an employee who calls dogs, dingoes. Took out 3 on Saturday morning, taken out about 62 over an 18-month period. We're seeing dogs in packs of up to 20, but consistently of up to 10. Now, we're not on our own, because I know the escarpment areas also are copying it. I know anywhere around the forestry up towards Cecil Plains are copying it. I think there's been a disappointing increase in the number of dogs, significant increase in the number of dogs. And I can't help but think that to look back on the older days when my old council, Mulmerran, had registered doggers who had to identify the property, the exact spot where the dog was taken, and they got significantly more money than we're getting. I know that many other councils are feeling the same way. There has been an explosion in dog numbers. We lost significantly, and I was most moved by one of our stockmen who said to me the other day, if he comes off his motorbike, he doesn't want to be close handy to a pack of 10 dogs, or if he gets knocked out or gets badly hurt. So it's reached another proportion, I think, in terms of dingoes, and I would hope that we can have a briefing of some sort, do some comparative work with some of the other people. And I know there's a responsibility on landowners, I know that, but there's also a responsibility on local government, particularly around the dingo fence, and I live right near a dingo fence, and no one can convince me there's more or less dogs on the clean side or the dirty side. There are dogs everywhere, crossing with some of the more dangerous dogs, the pig dogs, crossing with some of the Moranas who apparently do cross beautifully with the dingoes and provide a very cunning target for the doggers to catch. So it's a big problem out there, and I think we probably lost 40 or 50 calves last year as a result of it all. So I've got to declare that I have a particular interest, but I think it covers a very broad area. Councillor Taylor?
Mr Mayor, I totally agree with you. In the escarpment country up around Budgie, and they're seeing enormous increases. And as you say, it is the landowners, but some do take responsibility and some in the neighbourhood don't. So I guess that and a dingo goes about 15 k's on their loop. So there's definitely an increase in them.
Yep. And look, I can't help but think that it relates back to an issue that I bring up here regularly about the absolute neglect of Crown land that's owned by the state government. When I look at the vast area of forestry near us and the piddly little campaign they have in respect to baiting that just around the edges, and burning that just around the edges, I think that's probably part and parcel of one of the issues. Now, apart from that, I'll get over that in due course, there's some $200,000 was given to us by the state government around post the bushfires. Where did that money end up?
Can I take that question on notice and come back to you, Mr Mayor? I've got Kent Stroud working on that. Did ask for an update last week, but I don't think we've seen it.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No more questions. Would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor McMahon and Councillor O'Shea. Those in favour? That's carried. Just give me a moment. We then go to Finance and Business Strategy. Anne-Marie.
Morning again, councillors. The Innovation for Finance and Business Strategy group for the month is our stakeholder engagement and communication team. As you know, they designed and implemented a meeting audio and live streaming solution for council, and to date we've had 3,036 video views across the 5 public meetings. So this is up till the end of May, so that's been a terrific result for the team to be commended there. So Nick mentioned the depot is finished, so the consequences for finance and business strategy, the safety team moved out last week. The week before the stores team started their move out, and we'll be ready to go live with the new stores function from Thursday this week. So that's delivering service to all the operational areas. Just moving on to the people and organisational development, we've rolled out code of conduct and anti-bullying training for all staff since February, including going on live with some of that. The Pulse survey was presented to council, so we'll be rolling out the results of that to all our staff over the next couple of months. An important note there at the end of the pod report is the staff turnover has reduced to almost zero, and that was to be expected from the pandemic. And moving on to customer service, I spoke earlier on about the water rates due. So despite moving out that payment due date, still the majority of the phone calls, 42%, phone calls we received on the 11th and 12th of May were in relation to water rates. You can see there also a shift in accepting cashless payments where possible. So part of our stage 1 pandemic response was to remove the charge on credit card payments, and that's been taken up very well. So we're working closely with customers and making sure they're aware of all the payment options that are available and that we have removed those fees. And you can see there again 616 COVID-19 related inquiries during the month of May. Moving on to the finance report. So that graph there that's provided, that just shows the tracking of the payments coming in for water rate notices. And I think it's interesting to note that the majority of our ratepayers have paid the water rates, right up at the original due date. And that would mean, and many of them pay the full amount, so that $125 that council applied will be carried over as a credit to the next rates levied. Moving down to the procure to pay team there, and you would recall we amended the procurement policy, and this has resulted in, again, significant local procurement initiatives. Our vertical lift machines have been installed, so these are 6 metre high, 3 metre wide machines. I'll be looking forward to showing you how they work when you come on the tour next week. And the final graph there in the financial services section, again, just shows the result of the efforts we've made to ensure that we are engaging our local suppliers wherever possible. Happy to...
questions? Comment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks very much, through you, Mayor, through Anne-Marie. Obviously, the clear focus for this council, and particularly around the budget announcement yesterday, was around local business, supporting local staff and local families. So that said, page 5, our local spend, which is a graph that should be broadcast loudly to the likes of chambers of commerce around the place, because that's an extraordinary shift from where we were. And one would suggest that, given the announcements yesterday, that we could see that at least maintain those figures, I would think. That coupled with the COVID relief, or stage 1 response of paying 14 days on invoice, that had a significant difference to May as well. So I think that's a good trend, and it shows, and I guess the reason I'm highlighting that, Mr Mayor, is that this council and the previous council strategically made the decision to look at our buying policies, procurement policies, tender policies and documentation for this very reason. So if there ever is an example of how a strategy and an operational team work together, this is a great one. I just wanted to highlight that for councillors to, if you have an opportunity to speak about it, this is a great story to tell.
Yep, I agree with you, Councillor McDonald. I think it was a great strategy for council to begin to pay attention to exactly what we thought locally, measure that on a monthly basis, and just watch it improve. It was a real incentive. Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Bite my own tongue. I was wondering about when we had the presentation of the community survey the other day about the method that people want to be, how they want to be in touch with council, how they want to be communicated with. And it sort of surprised us in a way, because it wasn't so much the online and that we all think that we're moving towards. So in terms of reviewing the way that we are communicating with people, are we doing that at the moment?
Yes, we are. We're certainly taking on all the results of that community survey. And as you mentioned, a significant proportion of our community want to receive paper-based communication in the mailbox. So we'll be reviewing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Respect to finance, would someone like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor Shine, seconded by Councillor McDonald. Those in favour? Motion is carried. So then we move to item 11, review of council's policy 2.53, expense reimbursement and provision of facilities. Councillors. Who's presenting that, Brian?
There's no presentation.
Sorry?
It's just the committee.
Yeah, I'll second it, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Summerfield moved.
Councillor
And
Summerfield, you've moved, you've seconded
Thank you,
the receipt of that report.
thank you.
No discussion? That's the review of council policy.
Just trying to find the sticky note I put in. Sorry. I can't find it at the moment. It was just about the definition of council business in the policy. And it was in the track changes.
On page,
Oh yeah, on page, thanks, 63 of 76 in board books, in the definitions at the back of the document. I just had a query where it says, invite as a councillor to represent council, one councillor attending in which the meeting relates to their portfolio is considered adequate representation. I'm just wondering about the dynamics of that. And given there's 11 elected representatives, and some portfolios will actually have more public face than others as far as events and invitations go, and around how that would work. And oftentimes I can give an example where in my own portfolio we might get an invite to a UDIA breakfast, both Councillor Megan and myself. But am I to understand by this, the definition here, that it would only be either Councillor Megan or myself at that breakfast? Given the fact that a lot of the organisations do specifically invite councillors to actually hear their presentation and make representation to elected reps. So I'm just wondering, I thought there was some discussion around this as to not restricting for the very reasons I raise. I stand to be corrected, but that was my consideration of the matter.
Comment, Brian?
In relation to that one, that's events that are not specifically related to your duties, I would think, specifically as a presenting councillor or a direct relationship to something you're doing as a councillor in your role or in your professional attendance. So that's kind of things that my understanding was, if you're going to like Lions Club presentation dinners and handovers and those kind of meetings, that's what I understand that was actually all about. So attending a UDIA is part of every councillor's role, I would understand, to be able to attend those kind of meetings. Every councillor has an interest in the professional representation of an agency in relation to development within the city.
yeah.
Any other, Councillor Summerfield?
I'd like to follow up with that if I could, because none of us know who else is invited or going to events. We all just manage our own diaries. The things that we're invited to, we say yes or no to. And I would prefer that stipulation about one councillor attending be removed, because it's not possible to manage. I don't know if Councillor Carl's been invited to such and such a dinner. I've been invited. I attend. I accept to attend. he accepts to attend because he's been invited, and I just don't think it's manageable. I think that bracket needs to be removed.
Mr Mayor, can I make a comment? I agree. I agree with that because, if it's something that concerns us all and you're invited, I think to say one, Councillor Melissa and I, because of our portfolio, interested in the same things, and probably also crosses over into other portfolios. So I think the one should be removed as well. And if you're looking at chamber, well, we all get invited to that. UDIA, all councillors are invited to that. And I do ask sometimes if I've got two things to make sure that somebody's going. But other than that, Councillor Summerfield's correct. You don't really know who is and isn't invited.
Any other comments around the room? Councillor Carl, back to you.
I guess that the comment I would say, is that can we have that removed?
What exactly was that?
We're talking about page 63,
Attending.
definition of council business.
Yeah.
It's up to council if they wish to remove that. Just reading that, it says to represent council, so they're saying that there's one councillor who's representing council.
Mr Chair, if I may, is that to be interpreted? I get an official delegate if they're asked to present or give a speech on the night as distinctly different from the discretion of, as councillors here have mentioned, oftentimes you go to these events and whether it be a Lions or an Apex or any type of community organisation, they will often invite councillors as a collective because they often want to communicate to councillors their initiatives that are coming up or their what they're planning to do. And so is that distinctly different, Mr CEO, between their, it's not discriminating about the councillors as they receive an invite. It's more just speaking specifically about an official representative, which oftentimes is either the mayor or the deputy, or they're often invited.
Yeah. On rereading that, if you look at the last dot point, irregular service club special events to which councillors may be invited to attend, such as, for example, changeover events at Rotary. So that is considered to be ordinary business. So yes, you're happy to attend that. So when you read the other one above it, which we first talked about there, it's talking about if you're invited as to represent the council, they're saying one person should usually be enough.
Yep.
So I'd like...
There's no hassles in... I haven't... So we've got the flexibility, is what you're saying, in that policy as it stands. Okay.
Councillor Taylor.
Mr Mayor, I don't agree that the way that's written, that it says others, it says one councillor attending in which the meeting relates to their portfolio is considered adequate representation. I mean, you ask the people who say the UDIA, you wouldn't be going to all these things, but yes, there's the planning chair or the mayor, whoever is there, but you go and tell those people that councillors don't represent council. You always represent council wherever you go. As a public duty, and whether it's the delegate or not, you are still representing council.
I think that one is actually covered by the dot point 2 down from the one we were just talking about. Attending meetings with constituents, residents, ratepayers, community groups, developers, etc. UDIA, I would think, would represent the development industry, where arranged through official council channels and details of discussions are documented in official records or diaries.
I don't agree, but you're the CEO, so...
Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Given we're having so much discussion about it, which if at some stage or another down the track someone breaches it because of this paragraph in here or in brackets, we won't have this to rely on to say, well, he said, she said, whatever. in the interest of ensuring that we are covered as councillors representing in our community, and as the mover of the motion, I would like to move an amendment that we remove that bracketed area referring to one councillor, so that we know that we are safe in carrying out our duties.
I agree to that change.
You've moved the amendment to the motion, your own motion.
And I agree with it.
Second that motion, second that amendment. Do you wish to speak to it, councillor? I think we probably better go into debate of some sort.
I think I already have. We need to ensure that there's clarity, and I think it's confusing the issue by actually introducing that bracket. And we need to be rest assured that we can actually go about our duties knowing that we're following the policy.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak against the amendment to this? I'd have thought that, Councillor Shine?
Not against, but just to seek clarification if I could.
Clarification, okay.
It says to represent council. Is that something special, you know, in the sense of being authorised by a meeting of council to represent it?
Would someone like to answer that, Brian?
I wouldn't think so. We don't usually have those formally adopted by council to provide approval for a council to attend those kind of events. Because they can come at very, very short notice as well. People may invite, you know, only a week or two out, and councillors may not be able to attend because there wouldn't be a council meeting in place. So in practice, we haven't really been putting those before council. Often you'll have people, you know, asking councillors to come to a public meeting or to a presentation dinner, saying on behalf of council we'll just invite one person rather than inviting the whole of the council. So it's probably not practical to have those decisions made by the full council.
I take it would be inferred that you are being asked because you are a councillor,
yes,
therefore representing council. It'd be hard to imagine anything that we're invited to where we're not really representing council other than a personal type of interest, I suppose.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak for the amendment? If not, the amendment, Councillor Summerfield clearly points out that delete the item.
Brackets.
The number of the item.
The brackets.
Brackets, Mr Mayor. What's in brackets?
Attachment 2, yeah. Okay. So you don't wish to sum up, Councillor Summerfield? I'm finding it slightly confusing at the moment.
Well, what's making it more confusing was I requested that all of our policies actually have page numbers on them. This one still doesn't, and that would have helped in our description of where this paragraph is. But I think it's the third last page of the policy. It's in council business, and it's third dot point down that we remove the bracketed wording.
We remove the bracketed wording. Now, we've got that all sorted?
Right.
Yep. So you've moved the amendment. I'll close the debate. We're voting on the amendment. Those in favour of that amendment? That's carried. Right. So we've accepted that policy with that removed. Is that where we got to, Brian?
On the policy now, don't we?
Sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, point of order. I think we need now to vote on the policy.
No,
I didn't quite catch that.
we've done it.
We voted on the amendment. We now need to vote on the policy, accepting the policy.
We need to vote on the policy, or did we then vote on the
We voted on the policy with that amendment.
with that removed?
Oh, thank you.
That's my interpretation.
So it's actually not an
Everyone
official
comfortable with that?
amendment. It was not official amendment. It's just because it wasn't accepted and it was new, it was just for us to consider, so we adjusted it. Thank you.
Okay. We'll then move to, that's item 11 out of the road. Item 12, matters with which notice has been given. I don't think there are any matters that notice has been given for. Move then to item 13, any other business. Councillor Von Hoff, you wish to seek the permission of council by way of resolution to have a discussion around invitation to the Bunyas People Aboriginal Corporation Rangers.
Thanks, Mr Chair. So yes, in accordance with Council's 2.74 Standing Orders Policy, I ask that permission be granted to consider at this meeting an invitation to Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation Rangers to Council's prescribed burns carried out under Operation Cool Burn 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's been seconded by Councillor Taylor, moved by Councillor Von Hoff. Those in favour that we deal with this matter? It's carried. Councillor Von Hoff, you wish to move that resolution?
Yes, thank you. So the motion is in two parts. Part one, that Toowoomba Regional Council resolves to invite Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation Rangers to Toowoomba Regional Council's prescribed burns carried out under Operation Cool Burn 2020. Part two, that Council consider a report prepared by officers on how cultural burning could complement the efforts of Council in land management, environment and community committee meeting upon the conclusion of Operation Cool Burn 2020.
Okay.
Happy to second that, thank you.
Thank you. That's been seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any discussion there? Could I just ask if it wouldn't be a good idea to engage with some of the other parties who are in doing this? I speak of the Biggamble people, and they're giving a lot of advice to the land care group west of here at Mulmerran in terms of land burning, in terms of looking after the land. I just wonder if we ought to be a little more general. I haven't approached the Biggamble people to see if they are in any way interested, but I do know that they are significantly contributing to land use in our area. So, Councillor Taylor?
Mr Mayor, if I could make a comment, I think the Bunya peoples are used to the escarpment type country and the Biggambles more with the plain and river country.
Absolutely.
But I think that going forward, that's certainly what we should do, include the Biggambles.
It's only a suggestion on my part, only because I've heard of the good work they're doing.
I have to.
Out there. So, I don't know whether we ought to specifically mention Biggamble, but maybe we mention other parties. I'm not trying to change your resolution too much, except that I think we ought to recognise the value of a partnership with the Indigenous community. Councillor Megan?
I suppose just a comment, Mr Mayor, about consulting with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Advisory Committee as well.
How does that sit? Is this there? I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that one. But I think the Bunya people, as Councillor Von Hoff has brought forward, are very clearly committed, they're experienced, and certainly we need them on side.
Mr Mayor, if I could make a point, it just says here that they're coming to us to tell us at a future Environment and Community Committee meeting how cultural burning could complement the efforts of Council in land management. So, I mean, it's not locking us into having one group there. No. So when that comes back, then we can, perhaps we could have a workshop, information session around it, and then decide after that how we could best include and go to perhaps perhaps that presentation could be taken to the advisory committee, and we could look the way forward after that.
Okay. Well, do you want to leave the resolution just the way it is? I think it opens the door for this, and I think it's a good move. It will certainly build a stronger partnership between us and this group. Any reason for debate?
Could I just say something, please? I mean, this is the reason why we have information sessions, is so that we can actually nut it out properly before it comes to Council and ensure that we do get it right, that we are inclusive and that we've considered all aspects of it. I mean, the staff do provide us with good information in our briefings, and that's always fruitful, I think.
Okay. Councillor Von Hoff, you just wish to...
Can I speak to it, Mr Mayor?
Yes, absolutely.
So I firstly want to acknowledge Toowoomba Regional Council officers, the Local Disaster Management Group, QFES, the Rural Fire Service of Queensland, General Manager for Environment and Community Services, Nick Hauser, and yourself, Mayor Antonio, for your work and support this year with Operation Coolburn. I know that people in our region are appreciative of the efforts. Toowoomba Regional Council has a huge responsibility to manage the risk of fire on its land across 13,000 square kilometres. We're blessed with bushland and views, especially across the escarpment, but it's land that needs to be managed and protected. This past summer as a nation, we lost thousands of hectares of bush, millions of animals, homes, livelihoods and lives. As a region, we saw bushland burned, critical water infrastructure damaged, and some of our best people, our fireys, our rural fireys, our volunteer firefighters and our police risked their lives. We talked to friends and family who were evacuated from their homes. I believe there's wide support for prioritising fire mitigation and considering approaches that reduce the chance our region suffers a catastrophic burn. And so this motion is underpinned by the recognition of the ongoing work of Toowoomba Regional Council officers in fire management, the importance of managing the risk of bushfire, and the positive contribution Indigenous Australians have in mitigating risk through cultural burning practices. For millennia, Indigenous Australians have been reading land and executing burns that aim to reduce the frequency and the impact of high heat fires, while promoting healthy, resilient country and improved biodiversity. Their burning practices are sensitive to the land and consider the long term, year after year after year, of using fire to mitigate the risk of fire. Perhaps we could complement our existing practices with theirs. Rangers from the Bunya Peoples Aboriginal Corporation have existing partnerships with the Department of Transport and Main Roads, as well as the Western Downs Regional Council to conduct cultural burns to country to the east and northwest of the Toowoomba Regional Council. The intent of this motion is to make the Bunya Peoples Aboriginal Corporation Rangers feel welcome to attend Toowoomba Regional Council's Operation Coolburn, in the hope that both groups might share knowledge for the betterment of community and environment. We share a common goal, preventing devastating high heat fires and sensitively and sensibly acknowledging our role in mitigating the risk of fire in our region.
Thanks very much. Any other comments around the room, Kay?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just a quick one. I support the motion and agree with the sentiment of Councillor Bonhoff. The only thing I just wanted to add just really quickly is obviously from the briefing that we had the other day, I've had several conversations with General Manager Nick Hauser about this, and I think that process is already beginning in terms of obviously Mr Hauser speaking with this group and arranging this sort of thing. So I mean, so the wheels are already in motion. So this just sort of adds further to it.
Okay. Any other comments around the room? Councillor Cole and Councillor McMahon.
Yeah, look, it could be as simple as a few words in the second part of the motion, including other interested parties, because it'll be obviously the relationship and collaboration goes on beyond operational Coolburn 2020. So it may be, in fact, that as part of the body of that report, that other interested parties or Aboriginal Islander groups be engaged or consulted as part of that report to Council to consider.
Councillor, any comment on that?
Mr Mayor, I agree with that. I don't know where the appropriate place to put it, and but I mean, we've met these. They're interested, they're involved, but it's not to say that there aren't others. And I know that certainly it wouldn't be this council's intention or Councillor Bonhoff's intention to not be inclusive. So I think that I don't know. It's not I've only seconded the motion. But if we put up there rangers and other interested parties, so I guess that along those lines, I suppose I'm flagging an amendment to this, and I would ask to see.
Well, I'd imagine we might be able to get it through with just the consent of the mover and the seconder. So you're talking about the second line, Councillor Carl, of the first of point 1.
No, actually just including as part of the preparation, in point 2, as part of a report prepared.
Yeah.
And that's where go back to Councillor Summerfield's comments about, you know, as part of the officer's consideration, part of that report, that they can show us how they've engaged with other interested parties, because it's not so much about just cool burn, this initiative. I may be wrong, Councillor Von Hoff. It's more about the ongoing collaboration and initiative as well. So.
Sorry, Councillor Von Hoff, I missed you there before. Could you make a comment, please?
Oh, thanks, Mr Chair. Yes, so part 2 of that motion was worded such so that as to not be overly prescriptive and to know that the officers would be consulting widely and report back to council after they have consulted widely. There was obviously absolutely no intent to exclude any groups. So at council, I'm just considering if it's actually necessary or if it's stated there anyway. So let me see.
Any other comments around the room? Do you want to put the motion in its current form as moved, or do you want to just have those minor variations? I mean, your hands. As the mover, Councillor Von Hoff, do you want the motion put as it stands?
I'm inclined to keep it as it stands, actually, because I think we're talking about cultural burning. The inclusion of by Indigenous peoples seems superfluous there. Yeah. We already know. Let's keep this as clean and direct as possible. And if there's a desire to invite other groups to attend the prescribed burns, then perhaps that's actually addressed in item 1. Yeah. And we say that Toowoomba Regional Council resolves to invite Bunya People's Aboriginal Corporation Rangers and I just wonder though about the operational requirements then that would be put on our officers if we've got very many people attending these burns. So I'm actually inclined to keep it as it is and encourage Indigenous groups from across the region to please be in contact with Toowoomba Regional Council officers, and they'll take that into account when they're filing their report for council.
So, how's that been? We put the resolution forward as it is?
No, take that piece out.
So the Wendy, I think, did you add the by Indigenous peoples?
Yep, take that out.
Yes.
Take that out.
So that can be removed, and the motion is as it was initially submitted.
I think we put in the region there as well.
Yep. Comfortable with that? Look, I think this is just I mean, what's happened has been a real blessing to actually engage with these people, to find out when I go home and tell my family at home that they're already doing it with their Biggamble people, yeah. So I think that resolution is opening the door. It's giving us a position of wanting to work with them, which is important. So with your consent, councillors, we have a mover, Councillor Von Hoff, a second to Councillor Taylor, and I'll put the motion in the form that is before you at this point in time. Those in favour? That was carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Right, well that's it, councillors. That's the June meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council, unless there's some other business.
Eventual item, Mr Mayor. We might pause.
Oh, this is the one I've got to leave for.
Yeah, you've got to leave for it.
I'm out.
Pause.
I'll go on. Half the tucker will be gone by the time you guys get there.
I don't.
Right, I'm leaving.
I suggest, Mr Mayor, we pause just for a couple of minutes because the technology gets switched off and what have you. That part of the meeting can close and then we resume.
Just adjourn. Motion
to come back. Then do I have to come back? I have to come back to the vote, then leave again.
Yes, you will.
12:30. Should we have a quick lunch and come back?
I think we've got officers sitting here though, so.
Just a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting. Councillor McDonald has moved, we adjourn the meeting. Isn't it Councillor O'Hara Sullivan has seconded that? Those in favour? It's carried. So we adjourn for lunch. Declare the meeting open, and would someone move that we go into closed session, please? Councillor O'Shea and Councillor Shine. I have a declaration, which I've already read out once today. Pursuant with section 175E of the Local Government Act 2009, I would like to inform the meeting
Thank you very much, councillors, and welcome back to all of those watching with great interest online. The motion before us, councillors, is that council defer consideration of this report until the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 14th of July 2020 and that a council information session be held prior to that meeting. Do I have a mover of the motion? Moved by councillor Carroll, seconded by councillor Bill. Those in favour? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That concludes the ordinary meeting for June. Thank you for your attendance. Appreciate it. Looking forward to the afternoon sessions.